Is there going to be a dark alley? Where's this place at?
We all have the same history. We just have different tan lines.
If you're not doing pot, you're not in high school.
The earliest businesses I got into actually was with Jason Wickham. Here's going to be a story.
Farm them, right? That's
Oh,
the
of
number
course.
one.
It's what can you do for me, not what can't you do. Sometimes we felt like slaves, let me tell you.
If you don't have pride in it, then how do you expect other people to give you money for the product you're producing?
Keep doing it. Don't keep failing doing the same thing.
My dad was always, he wasn't just a father, he was a teacher.
Yeah. Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Totem Podcast. I'm your host, Monico Carrillo.
And like always here, I'm Eric. I'm the other co-host here on the show. But guys, remember, we're on all the podcast streaming platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, everything. So make sure to find us on there. And if you find value, share it around with one other person. We would really appreciate it. But guys, welcome to the show. We're in active rebellion is the question.
Cool. So the guest today, we're not in an alley. We're not in a dark alley. I just had to make that clear for today's guest.
Clear it up a little bit.
So Rick Stroh, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, nice to meet you. Appreciate you guys having me here. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come out here.
It's getting slower, thank God, in my old age, so it's not quite as busy as it used to be. But no, seriously glad to do it for you guys, or we're with you guys, however this works.
No, I'm excited for it. I knew this is going to be a great show because how our conversation started. You're like, is there going to be a dark alley? Where's this place at? I was just like, right? Oh, it's going to be fun.
No, but the perk of like having the same name as your dad, yeah. Rick thought he was talking to our dad the whole time.
Yeah.
Not you.
Yeah.
So like,
see, and that's generational because you wouldn't believe, because my dad had Chicken Inn across the street from here for years. A lot of people will hit me up on Facebook. Hey, let's be friends. We went to high school together, and they're talking about my dad. I literally had a guy I was selling a car to one day, and he was, and I know another good local family, and he's like, "Are you sure you didn't own the Chicken Inn back in the '80s?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm positive, man. I was in grade school." And he's like, "You sure you didn't party like with us over the weekends at the Chicken Inn?" I'm like, "Man, no, you're talking about my dad." So he had hair, I don't. So there's the difference. A little different. Yeah, and about 20 years difference probably, I'm sure, in time frames. So yep. The legacies of this town just continue.
Oh, that's great.
So for the people who like don't really know who you are, can you just give like a little brief breakdown of who you are, what you do? Because
sure, you're
manager. But you don't really look like a manager.
I know, right? I'm pretty laid back. So now, I'm Rick Stroh II. My dad had the Chicken Inn, as I said, which is now Santiago's here in town, from 1973 until he passed away in 2003. My brother Ryan, him and I have the Club Tap, and his girlfriend Christine, they work awfully hard at it, and we have Pig and Out Barbecue Catering currently. But my brother and I grew up in the restaurant, always grew up in business. My dad was always, he wasn't just a father, he was a teacher, which I tried to do for my kids as much as I could also. So he was always talking about business, talking about what you should do when he passes away, because he never expected to live very long, sadly, but because of his family genes, he didn't think he'd be around. So we grew up in that business in the restaurant day in, day out. My aunt and uncle have Edwards Market and Edwards Flowerland. So, and my uncle, Larry, that passed away, actually ran the restaurant, the kitchen for my dad, or with my dad, I should say, in the 70s and the 80s. So grew up in business that whole time, and I always knew I wanted to do something. My dad had a few apartments here in town, and I always thought that was a lot easier from the parts that I saw than the restaurant, because the restaurant in those days was 24/7, round the clock. He'd get calls in the middle of the night, hey, your dishwasher didn't show up, your cook didn't show up. He'd be scrambling. He'd have to spend Friday and Saturday nights down there, because it wasn't just the place to go to dinner. It was the place that everyone went to after they left the bars. And in those days, a lot of people went out during the week. It wasn't as big a deal or taboo, and people weren't quite so busy. It was a different atmosphere, I should say. We grew up, my mom's house, because my parents split when we were young, over here on Park Street. So in between where the Chicken Inn is, and now it's Napa Auto Parts. So we're going way back. There was a nightclub where Napa Auto Parts was, called Mr. K's. So every night we'd hear the bands playing and everything, and everybody, like I said, 2, 3 in the morning, they would leave there, go to the Chicken Inn. So my dad would have to go to work sometimes to to make sure everything was running correctly. So you when you grow up in a business that's 24/7, let alone a high service business like food, you're as much as the business as anybody else. We grew up bussing tables, working the register. Ryan, he grew up in the kitchen. He's a heck of a cook, even to this day, obviously. So grew up there. Like I said, I saw the apartments, thought that was the way to go. My parents were divorced, like I said, and they didn't get along very well. So we had kind of a volatile home life, I guess I should say, is the best way to put it. It was all over ridiculous stuff, really. Met the girl of my dreams in high school, crazy enough, and had a beautiful daughter, Chloe, who's now 30, works out at the college. And I had a Chloe in high school, and kind of not ran away from home across town with my child's mother. And we went off to college to CSU for a year and came back. And again, in the back of my mind, I always wanted to do apartments. So I bought off the late night TV. That's where you used to get all your info. We still get their infomercials, but there was no multimedia on your phone. The marketing was all the late night infomercials. So I bought a how to invest in apartments video, and watched like two-thirds of it, something like that, and kind of had it down in my head how I was going to do this. Happened to run into some people that were trying to sell some apartments, and I bought, I can't remember, it was like 20 units or something, all owner carry, didn't have to borrow any money, put that together, and the ball was rolling, man. So
was that course you bought, was it like legit? You think
it was legit? They kept asking me actually to go on their commercial. So I was gonna go on the commercial, but by then my marriage was falling apart, unfortunately. So I never went on the commercial, but it was legit. It was pretty solid.
So they wanted you as like a success story to put up on there.
Yeah, and they had a number of. I mean, that was the whole 30-minute infomercial was him selling his product, and then he had 4 or 5 or 10 people he'd fly down to Florida, and he'd go over how well it worked, what you did, what you didn't do, that kind of thing. And I'm sure they only aired the parts that worked. But it was a good program, and it's still pretty solid today. Unfortunately, during 2008, when the lending laws changed a little bit, some of that stuff couldn't be done nowadays. None of it was illegal by any means. But when the government, loaned out that TARP money in 2008 to keep banks in business because of all the negative equity on homes and real estate, they made it where you had to have even more equity in conventional lending. So unfortunately, like the owner would carry a portion of the building, and then I'd go get a loan on the rest of it. So it worked out beautifully, and it still could, probably under the right provisions, and some guys probably still are making it work, but it's just not as common as it once was. And it was really before a lot of people were into flipping homes. That really wasn't a thing. You had a few contractors here and there that were doing that, but it wasn't the norm that it is now by any means.
I'm curious, who were you like when you were like young, kind of like in high school? Because you grew up around business, your dad's working all the time, and you're just like, I'm guessing you probably like, hey, let's go, we got to do this now, we got to go to the Chicken Inn and work.
So or you have a different attitude of it when you're in high school too.
Yeah, it's so crazy. One of the earliest businesses I got into actually was with Jason Wickham. Here's going to be a story that he's probably embarrassed about, but
let's hear it.
Yeah, dude, right? Here's the dirt, as they call it, Motley Crue, the dirt. So we knew we were all in football together. Obviously, I grew up in sports, and we were coming back from some town on the bus, and we were talking about the kids that were into the illegal stuff. Well, we weren't into the illegal stuff, the drugs. I mean, that just wasn't a real big thing in high school. You had a few kids that did pot, but that was the extent of it. Now it's everything.
If you're not doing pot, you're not in high school.
Yeah. That's
pretty much what the attitude is nowadays.
And then, so I grew up. I had older siblings that had been around marijuana, so it wasn't a big deal to me. I never liked the taste of it. And by then I had a child, so I never. And it wasn't that I was just anti. It just wasn't for me. I didn't like it. I didn't get into it. So we thought, well, we got to have an angle, and it's not going to be drugs, plain and simple. So we had a connection that could get us alcohol. so we got, and that was back in the day when the kids used to cruise Main Street all the time before the big shutdown, and then they pushed them all over the park, and then they pushed them out of there. So, and it wasn't taboo to cruise Maine. It was the cool thing to do, but you were always trying to find someone to get you some beers. You know what I mean? It wasn't the end of the world back then. It was no big deal to go have a few beers, have a party somewhere if you could, house party. Nobody got sued. Probably in other towns, sadly, people passed away. I don't remember kids around my age passing away because they went and had a few beers at a house and went home, you know what I mean? And it still goes on, obviously. It's just more hush-hush because of all the liabilities, let alone the legalities. So we figured, well, we'll just cut to the chase. Instead of trying to hunt people down to buy us beer that night, we'll just go stockpile. So my sister-in-law, or my sister and my brother-in-law, were nice enough to rent us their basement. It really wasn't a basement. It was more like a storage cellar. And we had this connection. Jason actually had the connection. We got we got a horse trailer full of alcohol, all sorts of different things. Wine coolers were in style then, and all the beers, and that's when the party balls. You guys are so young. Coors Light used to put out like a little party ball. It was I think 3-gallon like soft keg almost of beer, and then the box wine. I can't think of the box wines. Everyone had those in their trunks, but we were figuring we're gonna skip to the chase and we're gonna sell this stuff. So it was me, Jason Wickham, and Wayne Smelzer. There's the 3 shout outs, and those guys were gonna go sell it. And since I was at home with a child on the weekends, I really didn't go out anymore. So they were going to go get the orders. I would go to my brother-in-law's, get the alcohol, give it to them, and then I would keep the money. Well, I'm not going to say who, but one of the 3 of us got a little too smart for our own britches and was undercutting the other 2, trying to give better deals, because he wasn't selling much. And the whole thing fell apart after about 4 or 5 months. But we always knew we were going to be in business somehow, some way, selling something. So it worked well. Like I said, for 2 or 3 months. I don't even remember who kept the money, who got the money. I don't even know if the original guy that got us the alcohol got paid. but we sold alcohol for 3 or 4 months, and that was the end of it, man. I remember at the time, was she my wife? I can't remember if she was my wife yet, even. But my kid's mom, Dincia Kudrin, shout out to her. Everyone knows Dincia. She was very mad at me for doing this because she was afraid I was going to get in all sorts of trouble. So, and one night I went to go get the alcohol for these guys because they called me, and she thought it was so stupid. She locked me out of the house, and I was pounding on the window to let me in, and I broke the window. And again, how old I am? We had a waterbed. The window shattered. It threw glass into the house and popped the waterbed.
Now you're sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, dude, a wet mess for the damn sure. So I learned my lesson twofold. So that was one of my early ventures into business.
How old was this? How old are you when you were doing this?
Oh shit, I'm sorry. I was 17, probably 16, 17.
When you started your first business?
Yeah, the illegal alcohol business. We were doing the 1920s alcohol runs. During Prohibition was. Prohibition for us, pretty much. We were hiding it under the wire. So
if you think about it now, I mean, that's pretty much like what they start doing with like DoorDash with like food.
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
So it's like you're onto something. You just had to you just put the regulations in.
Yeah, trying to get that law, updated. So, but that was one of our first ventures into business.
And how was it like? Would you guys like help your dad like in the restaurant and stuff?
Yeah, so actually that was early on. My brother and I, Ryan's 18 months younger than me, and he's much skinnier than I am, but we were closer in size back then, so my parents always dressed us alike like we were twins, and we weren't. My dad would always have us.
Does he have hair or no?
No, he doesn't have hair.
Okay.
Yeah, we got the same damn genes, man. So apparently we have the same parents.
They say.
Yeah, right? They say. So, yeah, I think I was in, like 3rd or 4th grade. So that would have put him in 2nd or 3rd grade, bussing tables. And we would do it on busy. So like I said, Fort Morgan was a much different environment then. It was much more socially acceptable, I would say, to be out every night. And it wasn't just the bar. It was like bar and restaurant. So you had the Chicken Inn, which would be hopping for dinner, and then you had Mr. K's, which would be a supper club, they would call it. They'd have live bands. And then across town where the realty place is, catty corner from the mortuary, okay. They've got a couple insurance offices in there. That was called the Colonial Restaurant, owned by Reuben Fife, and a friend of my father's. they had a restaurant and then a bar on the other end of the building. So people were out like literally almost every night of the week, and then they would end up at the Chicken Inn. But again, they would start there for dinner. So my brother and I would go over there, and instead of our dad leaving us home alone, he'd have us put on our little cardigan sweaters over our nice. Always had to have the shirt starched, and perfect to the nines, and we'd go bust tables, man. So we were trying to squeeze in and out of the little walkways and around the tables, busting tables, and sometimes the waitresses would tip us, sometimes they wouldn't. My dad would get mad at us if we took the tips from the wrong waitress, because some he liked, some he didn't, of course. But it started as early as that. And then we always had lawn jobs too. My dad was an old farm kid, so your lines always had to be perfectly straight. So I remember I started literally in 3rd grade having lawn jobs for the summertime. So it was just what you did, you know what I mean? And I think everybody has that in them too. It's just when you grow up in it, you're just more apt to do it. You're more apt to look for it. You're more apt to find it. When you're not raised in that environment, when you're raised doing other stuff, like all my friends, they were at the lake all summer long. No, we were always working, or we were always, my dad always made it seem like a job, even if we weren't doing that. We were doing lawns. When I had all the apartments, it was my dad and one of his renters and me. We'd take the whole Thursday and go mow all the lawns, because he didn't want to pay someone else to do it. He wanted them to be perfect. So we mowed all mine and his same day.
So did you like working with him, or did you kind of like resent him a little bit because like you'd rather be out hanging with your friends?
Yeah, there were times later in high school that I did resent it. Never really resented him, because we knew that's how he was. And he always told us point blank, he had it tougher than us. He grew up on a farm. Parents back in those days, they had kids to work on the farm. It sounds crappy, but that's just part of history, really. That's why families were so big. For one, you didn't have contraceptives. You didn't know, how to stop it. Mm-hmm. And number two, you needed the help. Yeah. There weren't as many people to hire. We all know the history. A lot of Spanish people came here to work in the fields and stuff. And my family was the same way, truly. The Germans all came here truly as kind of indentured servants. They weren't slaves by any means, but they were like the Spanish people. The sugar factory went to the leader of Russia, Catherine the Great, and said, hey, send me some of your good farmers, or send us some of your good farmers, because the land out here stinks so bad. And they knew the history of Russia. They took some German farmers, the Stroh family and the Thiel families and a number of other local families, over there to farm the crappy land of Russia, because they were such good farmers from Germany. So then when it came time to farm all this land out here that wasn't real fertile, wasn't good for the sugar beets, they went to Catherine the Great. They brought over a bunch of German Russians now, to farm the area, and then they worked the land, and then they worked it for long enough they could own it. So we all have the same history. We just have different tan lines. Really, different depths of tan. We're white Mexicans. It's all the same, dude.
It's all the same stuff.
Yeah, it's all the same. We've all worked to get where we're at, and everyone's had that dream for well over 200 years. It just hasn't been 200 years. It's just America's given people the best chance at accomplishing that, to actually own it, I think, Yeah. I don't know I'm far from a classically trained historian, but I got this from family over the years, and just listening. So, I know my grandfather was one of the top growers at one point for the sugar factory, and back in the day, man, that was like the thing. That was a big deal. Now you don't even hear about it. Nobody even realizes who raises the sugar beets. It's such a small and much more streamlined situation than it used to be. It's not,
especially now, people just complain about the smell every now and then.
Dude, right?
But it's important for like people to know like the history of where they came from and how they even got to where they're at.
100%.
Because a lot of times they'll be like they're talking with other people and just like talking crap about a certain subject or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then if they did the research, it's like, hey, your generation's kind of into this too. Like you gotta kind of have to like be able to just like learn yourself, so you can kind of be able to like just better educate yourself and just know what's going on and how you can get to like the next step.
100%.
It's the breaking news. People don't want to live with themselves. That's the problem.
Well, I think people forget. It's the old adage. If you don't learn history, it's destined to repeat itself. Mm-hmm. Well, I think in politics, which almost overcomes and overshadows everything in our daily life nowadays. You know, it used to be politics was only really important on the election year. Well, now because of all the news stations that are dedicated to it and all the social media, it's right there in your face, and everything is politics, man. It's such big money. So I think the politics of it is they don't want you to remember the past. They don't want you to remember what it took to get to here. They want to start new beefs and new BS because it keeps us confused while they can just keep printing the money or shelling it underneath the table. You know, they want the whites to hate the Mexicans, you know, or you can't say Mexican, you can't say the N-word now. But they want us to all hate each other. And we're all trying to do the same things. Just unfortunately, some people are pushed to do it the illegal way. Mm-hmm. Some people are pushed to just work their butts off and still never get it. So, you know, I think we all have similar origins. Or most of us, not all of us. I think it comes down to not even Democrat, Republicans, to it doesn't come down to Mexican, whites. It's the haves and the have-nots. All of us out here, we're the have-nots, unfortunately. But we're all trying to get to the haves.
Yeah, and it's like what you're saying. They all did, like with the political stuff. Democrat, Republican. Mm-hmm. With the race, they got the Mexicans, they got the whites. So they're dividing. I think 100%. They're dividing instead of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And they're doing, should we call it the Divided States of America now? Right. Or is that like, should we change the name?
Yeah.
But it's like a conspiracy theory. It's like the reason they made the movie Black Panther. Mm-hmm. It's like have it get so popular that when people go to search up the real Black Panthers back in the day,
oh really?
They don't come up, and you'll just get the movie stuff.
Oh, seriously?
So that's kind of like their way of hiding a little bit of history.
Oh, really?
Without hiding.
I never heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. It really wouldn't surprise me. And I used to hate conspiracy theorists, and theories, not theorists, but the theories of conspiracies, because I'm a numbers guy. I'm a spreadsheet guy, man. I like definite, even though math isn't always definite. It's dang close, man. And conspiracy theories always keep something that you don't even know. So how can you factor that in? Mm-hmm. You know. So same with if they're withholding truth, they don't want you to know that the Black Panthers, were pushing for their own thing, but in the end, they also saw that their own party, or that what they deemed as their own party, the Democrats, were supporting them. No, they were the same ones that were going after them. Yeah. They don't want them to see that. That's why I think racism, it is the. Man, I understand how people get sucked into it, and yes, there's racism, and it makes me sad. My daughter married a kid that's Mexican. My other daughter, Cabri, married Jamie Perez. He's full blood Mexican. My daughter Chloe, John Hirschfeld from Brush, he's half Spanish. Man, it doesn't matter. I mean, you grow up that way sometimes, sadly, because your crowd does, or it's just human nature to notice differences. You know, you're a boy or you're a girl, you know, and now unfortunately there's other kids that are confused. You know, or you're the white, black, Mexican. It's human nature to see the differences. But I think if you slow down and take the time and have an open mind, or you're raised correctly, we're all the same, man. We all bleed red.
That's where you just hit the nail on the head right there.
Dude,
because you said if we just slow down and think about it and raise our kids right, that's the problem. Yeah. I don't think they're going through life so fast, and then they're just like, wait up. You go to a restaurant, the kid's just chilling on his phone because I got, so it's like everyone's going too fast.
The kid cries, so just give him the phone so he can shut up.
Yeah. They don't take the time to. It's not that they don't take time to parent. We all get caught up in how busy our lives, and I was the worst at that. I'll admit that all day long. My dad, I guess part of how he taught Ryan and I was always get to the next step. You could always do better. You could always be better. You know, when we stayed with our weeks were split up. Half the week was with my dad, half the week was with my mom. And my dad always dressed us like little bankers, you know, and that just wasn't my brother and I, man. We had long hair before we had mullets before they were mullets, man. And, my mom's house, we kind of do what we wanted because she had 2 older kids. And my mom was a single mom, working her butt off, worked 2 jobs, always trying to get ahead. And it's not that my dad had tons of money, but he had enough money. He had the flexibility of taking us to work with him. My mom didn't have that flexibility. So with our moms, since my mom had other distractions, my older siblings were kind of high maintenance, I can call them that. We dressed ourselves, and so here we're wearing heavy metal T-shirts and stuff like that. And my dad would always make us wear those clothes back because he was picky. He didn't want those left at his house. He didn't want his good clothes taken to my mom's house. He was just anal about things, and that's fine.
All the good stuff's gonna stay over here.
Exactly. Yeah. It was almost torturous sometimes. But when we were wearing those clothes, we'd be driving home or something from school, and he'd see a kid that was all dressed nice. He'd go, "See that kid? They look like a Stroh." Like, and honestly, he didn't care what color they were. It was that they were dressed better than us, so they were instantly better, and he thought they looked better. So, it's what you think about yourselves, yes. But yeah, I think and again, I had those opinions before that some races weren't as good as others. No, man, I think it's environment as a lot of it. I think that it's from being naive and ignorant. Until you really slow down and you realize that people are people. They have feelings, they have concerns, they have dreams, they have goals. They can be. It doesn't need to be like you, but we can all be the same. And even if they're not the same, okay, fine, man. Just let them do their own thing. It's not about race. So.
And I think a lot of times that happens when people don't have enough going on in their life that they have to look for something else to do. They're
to nitpick, man.
They're not doing anything with their life. So let me go talk shit about this or whatever.
Agreed. Yeah, they nitpick.
Yeah.
They nitpick instead of looking at their own mirror. Everyone's got dirt. Everyone's got trash. Difference is everyone seemed to know mine. So I mean, and I'll say for all mine, I always said I truly never blamed my ex-wife Dincy or my girlfriend Jamie. Now I mean, it's she puts up a lot. I'll say that all day long because I'm still very opinionated. However, I do think I'm more open-minded than I used to be. That's an age thing. And sadly, if they could somehow teach that in school or your parents can teach that, good for them. Good, seriously. Because when you're so narrow-minded, and again, that's going back to racism, and I know how we got on the subject, probably from me yapping, but when you have that open mind, it's so much, just better, more good can come of it. It gets you further ahead to be able to open your mind, even if you don't agree with the end result, the end opinion, you still should listen fully to the other side because you look at now the talking heads on TV and we're going back to politics. Man, it doesn't matter. And we'll just use the names because it's what's going on. Doesn't matter what Donald Trump does. The other side, it's totally wrong. But Joe Biden does the same thing and it's completely right. You look like a moron. Mm-hmm. I would much rather, I've said this forever, if I die young like my family traits have tended to be, and hopefully I won't. Hopefully I'll be around a little longer for my grandkids, my kids. But I want people to say, Rick, he could sure be a dick. I mean, seriously, he could be an ass. Or he was a jerk sometimes, or he couldn't control his temper. But, there were other times he's really a good dude. Or whatever I am or whatever I'm not. I'm far from perfect. All the crap I've had in my life, it wasn't the other people. I had a part in it. They don't do that on TV. And they make it seem like we're completely perfect and the other side completely sucks. That's not life. We all know that, but we all feed into it. Then we all vote that way or don't vote that way, and then we all have to live with that result. It sucks. It's stupid.
I think a lot of people are kind of waking up to that though, because I think cable's disappearing. If you actually get down to your numbers guy, you get down to the statistics. Mm-hmm. Like there's three reasons. Remember we were talking about it? Yeah, there's 3 reasons why cable's still in business. Yeah. And it's of course, pharma money. That's the number one. Most of the revenue is pharma.
Sure.
But it's the baby boomers. They're the ones pretty much watching TV still.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I guess you can say, kind of keeping them alive.
Oh, yeah.
But I think they're just going to start disappearing because people now, the other one is sports because people live streaming. But what's happening with the sports? Football, Sunday Ticket is on YouTube TV now.
Right,
and all that shit. So, I don't need all these cable. I don't need cable. Yeah. If they don't got cable, they're not going to get the news.
Right.
So it's it's going to...
Yeah, it's going to start being a shift. Shifting. It's definitely changing. That falls back more into, of course, what we probably here to talk about business and marketing. But yeah, it 100%. And sadly, if you don't change, you die like a dinosaur. So my dad always said. And honestly, it happened to him. The Chicken Inn had changed over the years. This town, like I told you guys, it's shifted. 2 places that were hot nightclubs for years are now auto parts store and a real estate agency.
And now there's no nightlife here either.
Yeah, I mean, really, other than the 3 bars downtown, and that has shifted so much over the years. Off and on. People are going to drink on alcohol and drugs, legal drugs.
There's always a market for it. There's always a market. You're happy?
Yeah.
Let's roll.
You need your prescriptions?
Sad? Let's roll.
Exactly. And then they always say the sin stocks. Like cigarettes, alcohol, that kind of stuff. Yeah, people are gonna, when they're happy they drink, when they're sad they drink. So that's good and bad. It just depends on whether you let that control your life. Either way.
So how'd you guys get until now to the talking about nightlife and to the bar?
Okay, so I guess I we kind of went off a different path.
Good though. There's no path here.
Good.
It's open. There's no path.
That's great. That's good for me since I babble. That's my old age. So yeah, so I had the apartments. Like I said, unfortunately, Dincy and I got divorced. And stupid me, I had built, I don't even know, man. Seriously, I think I want to say I had 35 units in between Morgan and Brush. Had a good thing going, and then we got stupid, man. Testosterone got in the way. You know, we got too cocky in our marriage, and it fell apart. And instead of fighting for the apartments or making that and the rental properties, instead of keeping that intact, I gave her a few, sold the rest back to the previous owners, and started my wonderful life into, single life, really. Single psychosis, as I've coined it for years, because you could always see people who just got divorced or just about to get divorced. They lose their freaking minds, do stupid stuff.
How old were you when that happened?
So I got married Chloe was born when I was 16, and then Dincy and I got married when I graduated. So when I was 18, went to Fort Collins, came back after about a year at CSU because we were broke, couldn't afford it. Came back in 93, started buying apartments in 94-ish, I would say. Got divorced in 99, I think, so I was 26 when I got divorced, and did various jobs for a while, and got into car sales, man. Right when Clatworthy's was selling out, because Clatworthy's was right here where Viero is. That was Clatworthy, the Clatworthy company, John Clatworthy, one of the best guys ever to come out of Morgan County. Even though he wasn't born here, his grandfather had started the Clatworthy company, was the oldest dealership this side of the Mississippi, literally the oldest family-owned dealership, I should say, for a long time. And then that business changed so much, John decided to get out of that and go into real estate. So Tri-County from Pueblo came to town, and I got into car sales, and that's where I met Juan Ayala. His parents were always good customers of the restaurant, but really got to meet Juan, and man, that's a whole nother book in itself. But started selling cars, and it didn't take long really to love that. What I loved about the rental property thing was great. I grew up in service already, serving customers, either picking up their plate or dropping it off, one of the two, and checking them out at the register and talking to them for a minute and serving them good food. So you go to, renting apartments and supplying homes for people, literally, and fixing their problems and collecting the rent and organizing all that, because even in those days it was pretty intensive versus all the electronic ways now, which is still a lot of work. But I went from that to doing car deals, which happened a lot quicker, a lot faster than buying the apartments, which, like I said, I love that part, the buying and the selling. Making it work for the owner previously when they just wanted out. Now that I was giving them a payment, they were collecting some interest on their money, had to pay a little income, but it was a win-win. I love that part about the real estate business, at least in my my respect. But the car business, man, it was a win-win, and it was sometimes 2 or 3 a day. So that was the rush. You get guys up here that say that they do it for this, do it for that. Yeah. It's great to do the car deals. It's great to do the house deals. But at the end of the day, it was, okay, how much did that make me? So it's really, we all do this for a reason. I mean, there's a few guys that would do whatever they're doing for free if they could, but most wouldn't. Most wouldn't do their job for free. It all comes down to the money. And with car sales, you can make some pretty good money. I mean, truly. And it's not about, that's the other thing. It's the perspective of cars. People think, okay, so if you made money, I got screwed. You know what I mean? It's one of the first lessons in car sales is perspective is reality. If we're making no money on this car, but the guy thinks he got screwed, he got screwed. It's because you didn't do a good job showing him that in the marketplace, he got a fair deal at the very least, or a good deal. If you made a ton of money, but the guy's happy as heck because he's looked for all over for this car, then to him, he got a good deal regardless. And it really, because of the way the car business started, clear back in the day when it was horse traders, you know what I mean? It wasn't there wasn't an MSRP on the horse's butt, to the implements, the used stuff. There was that gray area, the negotiation. It wasn't a set price like Amazon. There's no negotiation. So people are getting away from that. But over the years, it's been hey, what kind of deal did you get? So I figured out pretty early it it was about perspective, number one. And number two, I would tell people it doesn't matter whether truly, and there are car deals, we lose $2,000 right off the get-go, right off the jump, because we've either had it too long or we bought it wrong or we had to do more to repair it to make it street worthy and make it a good car for a customer. So there are times you lose money right off the bat. But then there's times, you hit what we call a home run and you make, $3,000 or $4,000. But again, the customer, it's still to me a good deal because it's always within book value. The banks always corral you into an amount you can sell it for. And here's the biggest one. We want to get it in and get it out as quick as possible. Because the more we do that, we get trades-ins for the service department to take care of, for the parts department to take care of, the detail guys to take care of. So they're coming and going pretty quick. Very rarely, I don't feel, do you get screwed, especially in a hometown, small town. In the big town, I'm never going to see you again, so they don't care about that. Here, I'm going to see it at my aunt and uncle's grocery store, down at the tap, at our bar, or somewhere along the line. So I don't feel like we screw anybody. I wouldn't want to do that. Why do one home run if that's going to be the only one? I'd rather do a bunch of base hits.
Yeah, then your name's going to get kind of burned around town. It's a relatively small town.
People
or everything else. People are going to know, and they're not going to
100%
come back.
No, and I've had so many good customers over the years, and sadly, some of them I can't service any longer because I used to be able to get new Fords or new Dodge Chrysler Jeep Rams or new Chevys even for a while. Now it's just new Toyotas, so that does negate some of my customers, unfortunately, and sadly, and truly, it really does stink because you work your tail off to really take care of customers. But
So I'm wondering, how do you know when the person that walks in, because you're a manager there, so like they walk in, that they're actually like the good salesperson?
Oh,
because
the salesperson.
Because statistic wise, it's supposedly it says like a person in sales lasts about 18 months doing
really?
it, but they don't actually start making some money till like 2 or 3 years in, because like if you go in and you don't know shit about sales, like how are you gonna expect to sell anything? Like you're talking about with all this other stuff. Number one is like what I'm getting from it is like you're serving the people. Once you flip that and you try to make the deal benefit you and not them, like it's not gonna work.
No, so I would, you really, it goes back to, it doesn't matter whether it's an employee, and I don't mean to say my employee because we all work for someone else. But I have to oversee them and I have to coach them, and sometimes I don't do a good job about that. I'll be honest. I'm far from perfect. Holy cow, I'd be on a beach somewhere if I was. I don't think you can judge any book by its cover. I've seen people who literally completely just like the idea, like what they've heard about the possibility of money. And I've seen people who you think should be good and completely suck at it. I think it goes back to even the being in business mindset. You can either be trained or you can be kind of groomed into it because that's been your whole life. I wouldn't say when I see somebody come in, there's been people I've bet on, I'm like, oh yeah, that person's going to be awesome at selling cars. There's been a few of them, I don't think they would be a good employee anywhere. I wouldn't want to work with them doing anything. There's so many, like you said, there's so many distractions. I mean, and it's even harder in our world or our type of business, and there's probably a multitude of them out there that are the same, to where you need to be on your phone to some degree. Well, our guys and gals have to be on their phones because a lot of customers, all my customers contacted me through my cell phone, all my renters always did. So, the difference was I was disciplined enough that, I might get distracted, as you guys now say, go down the rabbit hole onto some other subject, just like we have here chatting. But then I always got back on task pretty quickly. A lot of people don't have that discipline. I don't know if it's age, if it's experience, if it's motivation. In the car business, I'll tell you what, especially on the front range, and it changes as you get further away from Denver, obviously, all the choices you have up there. But they truly feel that if you're not 24/7 cars, it's not going to work for them. So out here, we're a little bit more accepting and a little bit more forgiving of those distractions. But up there, I'll bet you they're not, man. I bet you they don't take it. And when I started at Tri-County, which, like I said, took the place of Clatworthy's, back in 2000, man, I'll tell you what, you were either serious about selling cars or you could pound sand. They didn't care. They thought it was almost not funny, but it was just because, again, they were big city. They wanted to crack you. You know, Juan could tell you about that. Ayala. They would laugh. They'd give you the knuckles. They'd say, "I'm going to crack you," and they would ride your butt. I'm going to ride you like Zorro. They would laugh. They wanted to see if they could make you cry, because if they could make you cry, then you weren't going to make it from a customer who wanted to give you the jazz, because you do get some boisterous customers. And again, that's changing with time. That's like the people watching the old news. That's going away with time, because that's kind of the old school. I've got to be tough and hammer out a good deal. Those days are kind of going away. You don't get people that pound you like they used to, but that was the old school way of thinking on training, was you had to be able to take some serious jazz from your bosses. Otherwise, you're going to crack by someone asking you too many questions and you don't have an answer. So
I think that can be kind of due to, like, maybe because I'm a numbers guy. So I go back to, you start seeing most of the people, I think the number, I don't know the exact number, but I want to say it's close to like 70 or 80% do research on a vehicle before they go buy online.
Oh,
so it's like, if they're going, like, dude, it should be, I think it should be tell me if I'm wrong, but it should be an easier sell, because they've seen 5 vehicles. So if they chose to come to yours, there's something about it that they like.
100%.
So like you said, it's your responsibility if they're not feel like they're not getting a good deal. Like, it's your responsibility. That's your job. Tell them why it's a good deal.
Yeah. I think if it's only about the numbers, no offense to me, and I tell the guys at work and gals at work, if it's only about the numbers, then you've missed something. I mean, exactly. Let's face it, we might sell, as an individual, we might sell 2 or 3 cars a day, and that happens. They call it a hat trick at work, and Landon Doyle hits it, Jamie Perez. I mean, all of our guys have hit it. Ever Burciaga, he's hit it. They've all, Vic Mendez, they've all done 3 cars in a day. That's a lot of work, man. That's a lot of work. Sarah Rivera's done it. Kerry Armagast, who's been there, he's done it. Jim Meshke, all these guys. Chilla, you guys know Marisol Palma? Yeah, she's back selling cars. She was a little Mexican car salesman, and everyone knew her. She's sold 3 cars a day. That's a lot of work. And if it's only about the numbers, as a salesman, you honestly, to me, not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, you've already missed the sale. Because the customer, you might sell 3 cars a day, but that customer is only buying, on average, 1 car every 3 years. So it's an emotional thing. And if you haven't got them to get an emotional attachment to that car, then you've missed the sale.
People buy on emotions.
Yeah, 100%. It's what can you do for me? That's one thing I learned about. I can't remember if it was the real estate video or where the heck I learned it, but people don't want to know what you can't do for them. They want to know what you can do for them. I think it might have been Tony Cuomo, my first car sales boss, that actually said that. And my kids learned that early on. I listened to I think it was Chloe when she was in college doing a phone interview, and she said those exact same words and she got the job, man. Because I always took my kids to work just like my dad did. Literally, if my kids come to the restaurant, both my girls worked at the restaurant. All 3 of my kids worked at the barbecue. My brother and Christine now barbecue out at the racetracks on every other Saturday night. My kids hawk food out there in the hot, greasy, steamy, food houses out there. Gage used to go with me to the bar every morning to count the drawer. They never went at night. For everyone who's worried about that, but
for the people who are going to start commenting,
yeah, exactly. But they were always with me at business or at work, and it's what can you do for me, not what can't you do. And if you're only worrying about just the numbers, you've missed the boat. If it's, you got to get them attached to it. It's what can this car do for you? It's what does it, how does it make you feel? How does it make you look? Is this and we teach, there's supposed to be steps, the good car sales teachers over the years, Grant Cardone, and a lot of people don't like him because he's cocky now, he's into real estate, but you can take something from all those guys. Andy Elliott, that guy's on fire.
He's a fucking beast.
Dude, which one?
Both of them. Elliott, dude. Elliott. He's fucking jacked. He's on face.
Like, yeah.
Like you feel good. You feel good. You talk good. You're going to sell good. Like
100%, dude. So, we all went down. We all took a company trip, even though the company didn't pay for it. We did when we were still Ehrlich. We went down to Arizona and went to his Sunday things. Landon's been 2 or 3 times. Dude, the guy's solid on his sales steps. And he all started with cars. His whole thing started with cars. A lot of them did. Andy Elliott, Grant Cardone, a number of them over the years have started in cars.
Why do you think that is, though?
Because it's such a high-paced, fast environment. houses at the most, man, you're going to be able to buy one a month, just because of the time it takes. And rightly so. You got to make sure that the foundation isn't cracked. You got to make sure that there's not a contractor's lien against that property. It all takes time. In a car, you can do a car deal. I've done car deals from Mexico. I mean, you can do car deals fairly quickly. You can do them fast. So you're doing it for money, but there is that rush that goes along with it. I mean, if there's any drug of mine, that's it. I truly, at the end of the day, like making people happy. I like finding that car. I'll be honest, it's harder, especially because of COVID. I mean, it changed everything, some for the better, some for the worse. But, man, I think it's because it's fast-paced. And especially in the bigger cities, it's thought of as a nice job. I mean, those guys wear three-piece suits, $1,000 suits. Thank God we don't do it out here because I'm terrible in a suit. I look like John Candy or something. But
quit right away, resign.
Yeah, dude. Every time we get a new owner, that's always my first thing. Can we wear shorts? I mean, I want to be able to be chill and comfortable because I'm there a lot. I mean, I'm there a lot even when I don't have to be because there's always something to do. To me, you can always be either bettering the store, bettering your process, making your cars look better. Finishing some detail you haven't done. There's always something. I remake paperwork and get it submitted so that they automatically print instead of us having to handwrite it. There's always something someone should do. Even though I'm not the owner of the company, that's how I was wired from when I was a kid. Obviously, you can always better something.
It's just taking that pride in your work.
100%, man. 100%.
That's how we were. It's just like, no matter what we're doing, it's like you have to put all your effort into it because then if you don't do it, then what's the point?
Exactly.
If you don't have pride in it, then how do you expect other people to give you money for the product you're producing?
100%, and that's what separates you. I think there's marketing even before you know it's marketing. You're branding yourself as the quality guy. My customers knew on a Sunday. Literally, on Sunday they could call me and say, "Hey, my car, something's not right." I could run over and get them a car to loan them, and then worry about their car on Monday because I was that guy. You talk about the people that investigate their vehicle. I used to tell my customers, hey, man, there's no way. And I always joke, it's from the years of PRing at the bar, as the public relations guy at the bar. So I don't remember a lot of stuff sometimes. That was my job, was just to PR. Jamie, the years we dated off and on, she'd be like, yeah, you got to go to work, and it's like, my job is to work and hang out. I mean, I know it doesn't look like it. Juan can attest to this. That's my job. If I'm not there drinking and hanging out, no one else is going to do it either. So unfortunately,
someone has to be the first one to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, exactly, right? You gotta make the party. It doesn't just happen. So when they had the tattoo parlor next door, you had to make the party happen. But I tell customers, there's no way for me to know everything about this make, model, and year. There's just you'd have to be Jeopardy quality genius to remember everything. So to me, you're always, like I said, you're always selling something. I always sold me, hands down, and Andy Elliott will tell you that. And I was glad to hear him say it. It kind of took the weight off my shoulders because Toyota, man, that Ehrlich especially, that group was solid and they were awesome at memorizing what the Avalon had versus the Camry versus the Corolla. Heck, I didn't know. I barely still know, and I've been there for 4 years. Again, it doesn't matter. If you want to buy it, great news, man. I'll take care of you. I will figure it out. I will get you the best loan possible. I will work through that. But because, you might know that it's going to have seat heaters versus the LE model. Yes, I know it now, but I didn't always know that. There's just no way for me to know that. You're going to investigate one, maybe 3 cars. Typically that's what they do. They narrow it down to 2 or 3 cars. The vast majority of them know exactly which make model they want. I don't know what a 16 Chevy Traverse, I have no way of knowing. So, and Andy Little will say that 10% is the product knowledge, 10%. Now, that's true in car sales. That's probably not true. And like when Wickham was on here about when they had the feed business. You know what I mean? They probably had to know what this food did for that cow versus this food does. So that 10% is probably a little bigger. Mm-hmm. But like he said, it was all about the service. And once that went out the window, when that wasn't on the top requirements of his customer base, where'd that go? That sucks. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's still about service in the car business on a small scale. Man, McDonald, Toyota now, I would say, I don't even know. I've done the math before, but it's solidly approaching 50% of our customers aren't even from Fort Morgan.
Really?
So it's all about just the math. It's all about just the numbers. And Carvana and CarMax and, Auto Trader, Cars.com, they've made it that way. It's not about who's got the best car. It's not about who does the most reconditioning or recon, as we call it. It's all about who's got the cheapest car with the fewest miles, you know what I mean, and the cleanest Carfax. And I get it. That's what customers really want because, again, they've done all the investigating. Yeah, the research. They know which model they want, which make they want. It's all about lowest miles, lowest price. And what's crazy is in our world, there's one company that owns software that tells you not just where you sit in the marketplace, but where everybody else who's using the same software sits. So you know exactly whether you're in it a little too deep, whether you overbought, whether you're gonna have to literally lose money right off the bat, which happens every day in our business. It's a crazy, fast-changing, fast-paced world. It really is, even when it's slower than heck at this one store.
I'm curious how we're talking about when you went to the training with Elliot and all this. And how'd you come to like the realization? Like it happened probably before that, but that you need to sell you instead of the product.
Oh man, honestly that happened a long time ago. That for me it was way before Andy Elliott. That was, gosh dang dude. It probably really hit me in the head during my single psychosis when my whole world I nobody stripped it away from me. I let it go like a dumb young kid. And I figured out I had to do something that separated myself. Literally at Tri-County, we had 12 salespeople. I mean, this little store of Clatworthy's went from selling, I think, John, on average, they probably sold 40, 50 cars a month. I'm guessing somewhere in there, maybe a little higher. Tri-County, we were selling 120. And those guys were fast-paced, get them in, get them out. And that wasn't the customers, the cars. That was their machine. Get the cars in, get them out. Because, again, keep the service department busy, parts business busy, detail guys. That place was humming. And salesman, he didn't really care. He was from the big city. You were as replaceable as the car. If you couldn't do your job, if you didn't learn your closes, which again is just a way to soften customers from making that big decision, because it's just like coming in here. A little nervous. I don't do this every day. You guys do this every day. It's like old hat to you guys. I don't do this every day. Like I'm talking in front of a camera.
No. Trust me, no. I mean, it's not.
You guys are like seasoned professionals, man. So the only thing missing here is like a beard or something. But
open the fridge, Eric. God damn it! Actually,
now we're talking. It's man, you learn that you got to do something, just as you guys have done, to separate you from the next guys doing the podcast. For me, it was. I'll admit it all day long, man. My dad had created a good name in this town, and him worrying about what we did every time we got in trouble. God, we had to hear about, man, you're going to Strohs. You're going to make my customers mad. There's always something. So my dad always had higher expectations of us. He always said, you're this because you're a Stroh. So a lot of people that in our inner circle would say, oh, you think you're better because you're a Stroh. Well, my dad did that because we were too little to understand that he just wanted us to be better because you are you. End of story. He just tacked it on there with you got to do more because you're a Stroh. Because he didn't want you to ruin his name and what he had done. Again, didn't think he was better than anybody. Like he had said, he would serve food and take care of good anybody, the town drunk that came in, this Saturday night, and then he would serve all the church people on Sunday morning. So it didn't matter to him who he was serving, who you were taking care of. You're not better in that respect, but you should think more of yourself and act better, be better. It's almost like a higher power in a way, almost like a godly religion, that you should expect more of yourself. And in the same sense, if you take care of people that way, whether it's car sales, your renters, if you wouldn't live in it, if you would want them to, you want to treat them the way you want them to treat you. And that's been something that's failed me over the years. I'll be honest with you. It happened when Transwest bought this store over here because the previous owners didn't do what they had said they were. And George Eisen's Transwest, they do couple $1 billion in sales. George said to me, he's like, man, I did it on a handshake. I didn't think they were going to take some stuff. What it was, they took some equipment they weren't supposed to. And the owner didn't even know that. It was some of the guys working there. They swapped it out. And they ended up swapping it back after a conversation. But like George, who's, like I said, $2 billion in sales a year, was like, I do business on a handshake. And he's like, but I expect people to treat me the way I expect, to treat them myself. Mm-hmm. So it can be a failure. It can be a bad thing, but overall it has served me right, treating my customers as I expect to be treated. And I would assume that if I had just bought a car, whether it's $10,000 or now, $80,000, if I go home and the thing doesn't start in the morning, I should be able to call my salesman and have him run over here and get that thing started, or at least help me figure it out. Again, sadly, to some extent that world has changed because of liabilities and what dealerships will allow you to do. And I get it from their perspective. It's a lot of liability, just loaning them a car without getting, their insurance and that kind of stuff. But that's what I did. I figured out early on that if I took people the way I had done it previously, the way my dad would expect, that people would come back to me. That's what they did with John Clatworthy. That's what they did with Terry McAllister, who's another good friend of mine. He had McAllister's Ford out here for years. And Terry, people called him day and night all the time. And Terry and I have had long talks about that. Terry actually sold cars with me. And that's how he separated himself. John, man, if you guys know John Clatworthy at all, John is the bomb. He kind of took the place of my dad. When my dad passed away, my dad had previously asked John to take care of his estate. So John's become a second father. He's put up with some serious shit from me, and especially my brother and my sister a little bit, but mainly me, I know it. So, but, everyone wanted to buy a car from John. He had 7 other salespeople, but everyone wanted to buy a car from John because John took care of people. McAllister took care of people. I knew I wanted to be that guy. I didn't want to be the stereotypical plaid suit car salesman. Mm-hmm. When off that old movie, Used Cars. Your car leaves and it breaks down. The joke and the slap on the back that it's got the tail light special warranty. Once we see the tail lights, the warranty's gone. Yeah, screw that. Now, and that's truly, I don't say that to this day. That's why I believe in warranties so much, because you can't afford to fix everything now. Just because you're taking care of people, you got to use your head too. That's why I advise people, buy the warranty. I bought a warranty on my truck. I make my kids buy a warranty because shit breaks, man. You guys got all these electronics. This stuff, you never know when it's going to go out. Mm-hmm. So that's part of taking care of your customers. It's no different than your financial advisor. Your financial advisor, your retirement guy saying, buy this stock, don't buy that stock. He's advising you. That's what we should do. Even though I might want to dress in shorts, I feel like I'm a professional because I've done it for so dang long. I know the stuff you don't. You buy a car every 3 years. I know what the rates are. I know what you shouldn't do, to get a loan. I know which cars you should stay away from that tend to have more electrical problems. So I guess that's the best I can say is how I separated myself apart, and that's what I've done from day one. Just be totally honest. If it's a bad car, man, if you really want to buy it, if it tends to have electrical problems, if you really want to buy it, I will sell it to you, but I won't sell it to you. I won't push it because no, I don't want to set myself up just to have you come back or tell your neighbor that I sold you a lemon. Because even the sad part is, even if I never even touched that car, even if I never sat in it, it's still my fault. You're still going to tell people you bought a turd from Rick. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, what I'm getting from it is I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a lot of the stuff that you're saying, I think we learn a lot of the stuff when we're young, when we're very young. And numbers guy again, from 0 to 7 is when you learn most of your stuff. You can learn a lot of other stuff, but it's like your unconscious is absorbing so much stuff. What I'm thinking, your dad had a big impact in your life.
Huge.
So what was the biggest thing that you learned from him that impacted your life the most? If it could be one thing, what one thing would it be?
Like I said, my brother and I were more students than even children sometimes. Even to the point, sometimes we felt like slaves, let me tell you. Because, it was, like you say, when you want to be out with your friends, you were mowing the lawn and making your lines straight. The biggest thing. So, again, I will say that as much good as I learned from my dad about being a businessman and being a father, I also learned things I didn't want to do or emulate it. My dad wasn't an overly affectionate guy. It took a lot for him to tell you he loved you, so I always wanted to do the opposite of that. It wasn't that he was a bad guy. It was just that was how he was raised. So I thought I was deep enough to not, and I wasn't always a perfect father. Holy cow, let me tell you. Even though I tried to coach all the sports I could, not just because I love the sports and my kids, but because I want to spend that extra time, which I failed at as far as trips and vacations because I was always working. But I'd say the biggest positive I would learn from my dad was probably that he would always say, the president, no matter who you voted for, wrong or right, good or bad, is literally the most powerful man in the world. I don't know if anyone can disagree with that. I mean, he's got the nuclear launch codes. America's the most powerful country, the most wealthy country by far. But yeah, he doesn't know everything. He has advisors. He has
His cabinet.
His cabinet. There you go. My bad. See, there's the single psychosis. I can't remember all the words. But yeah, his cabinet. So he gets advice. And I think that's probably people's failures, that they don't get advice, man. They think they know it all, or they want to go against the advice, which happens even probably at the presidential level. Well, what happens? Man, they end up a big blooper, end up Watergate, end up getting removed from the presidency, stupid stuff. But yeah, that even no matter how much you know on the subject, you can always learn. You can always get better advice from somebody who does even more or has a different perspective. I guess that's part of what opened my mind fairly young, not young enough, I'll say that all day long, but at a fairly young age, that you always could do better, could do more, could learn more, could see a different perspective. But yeah, I guess he taught me the open-mindedness. He was a very spiritual guy, I would say, but we didn't go to church, man. That was the busiest day at the restaurant. You didn't go to church. We didn't have time. You had to work. It was always about work. But he believed in God. I remember we were quite young. Talk about traumatizing. My dad was very blunt and very literal. And my dad was also a very cool guy, very charismatic. I'd come back from college, and I remember going to his house one time, and all my friends' cars are there. And I stop in, and I think Dincia was over at her mom's house or whatever with Chloe, and I go to my dad's, and like I said, all my friends, and half of them had worked at the restaurant, because that was like the place to work. Man, my dad always believed in hiring the youngest, the cutest girls. It was, sex sells. I mean, the Budweiser girls aren't ugly for a reason. Yeah. Of course, nowadays that doesn't quite hold, but in the old days,
it's a little different now.
Yeah, no, you can be whatever persuasion you are, whichever way you swing, wherever you want to be. Hell. I identify as a stallion or whatever, but all my friends are hanging out there, and I was like, you bastards are all hanging out with my dad. You didn't even call me and tell me you're going to be in town, So my dad would always, there were girls our age, and not that my dad was hanky-panky with the young girls, but there were girls my age, my brother's age, come back from college. They liked my dad so much because he was so just charismatic and cool. They'd go hang out at his house. Their parents would get mad that they would come back for the weekend, stay at his house, work at the restaurant, and then go back to college without even seeing their families. So, and they'll still come and tell me, remember when my daughter came back and visited and she'd stay with your dad? I mean, my dad he was a cool guy. He really was. He learned that charm went a long way. It's personality, man. I mean, most people who make it in, this line of business, they're charismatic. They're bigger than life. They know how to be, Landon Doyle. He's a good car salesman because he's big and boisterous and he's easy to remember. You know what I mean? So you got to stand out. But yeah, my dad's, I would say probably the best advice was to get advice. Truly. He always had a good accountant, Rick Doty. He always went to Rick Doty. Always went to Ed Zorn for legal advice. Always talked to John Clowerty. Those guys hung out almost every day. And my dad was always bouncing ideas off of him, giving him his perspective. My dad wasn't, crazy enough, I'm kind of the same social way. My dad wasn't overly social. If he was invited to, and Clowerty will tell you, they'd invite him to a party. My dad would come half an hour early and then leave like 15 minutes later. He didn't want to sit and bullshit with everybody. But on a one-on-one basis, he was fine at it. And I'm sure back in the day when the restaurant, the bar in the back was hopping, I'm sure he plenty social. But he didn't set out to do that. He set out to work and then drink it and socialize and became the work. So, but yeah, get advice, man. Get advice. Much better than just jumping in. That's how you fail, I think. That's why at work, even though ownership, they don't want to spend the money because Andy Elliott costs money, and he's got the best sales program right now. He's all over YouTube. But of course, that's how he makes his money. He charges for it. He's got a lot of free stuff online, but our ownership doesn't want to spend the money. I get it. It's all cost. But that's what I tell every salesman. Use Andy Elliott because he's got the best program right now. Grant Cardone used to. Before him, it was, I can't even think of, Zig Ziglar. That was the big one when I started. Zig Ziglar was the guy who sold cars, RVs, real estate, because they all start out the same. And I think cars are just the fastest one. You know, real estate's more of a slower game, but cars is faster paced. So.
Oh yeah, it's great.
But I also learned from my dad too that is because my dad actually had sold the restaurant for a couple years when we were in middle school, so like the late '80s, and he went into real estate. But by then, the guy who bought the restaurant couldn't make the payments because he had ruined what my dad had set up. So my dad got it back, had to remodel the restaurant and rebuild it, and that's when he stopped doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He went to 6 to 9 at night, and then Sundays close at 2. So.
Okay. No,
So see, he even did that same path. Went into real estate. That's where the real money's at, apparently. I guess I haven't caught that bug.
That's what they say. I don't know. So like a lot of our audience who like watches the show and stuff, they're like younger crowd. So if you could go back and give yourself some advice when you're about to graduate high school, early 20s, what would that advice be?
Oh man, don't get divorced. That's expensive. That was a stupid one on my part. I mean, Dincy and I are good friends now. We live right over the hedge from each other. We're literally neighbors, so we can see them. I figured if I was going to be living in Fort Morgan, because Jamie and I, we go to Mexico a lot. I love Mexico, man. Love Mexico. But my kids knew my plan was to get the heck out, you know, go to Mexico once they were all 18. Heck, they all moved back here. They weren't supposed to move back to Fort Morgan. They were going to go on to bigger and better things, you know, you always dream of. They moved back, and then on top of that, they had kids. So my little grandkids, Oaks and Wilder with Chloe and Tilly and Prim with Cabry. I get to see them more since they're right there next door at Dincy has a lot. But I would say, you know, my biggest advice, slow down and enjoy the process. Truly. I was always, like I said, I was always trying to get to the next thing so much that I didn't slow down and enjoy my kids as much as I should when they were little. I've got those memories, and I did take the time. Like Dincy had the ability to go on a lot of trips and slow down and take that time, and other people in other lines of work do too. But we were always doing the restaurant or the bar or the barbecue, and you just felt like you couldn't do something, you couldn't get away. You always had to be back. You always had to be back to work. You know, I mean, luckily as I got older, obviously things slowed down a little bit to where I could, and I've sold cars from Mexico. I've lined up barbecues. I've lined up parties for the bar. But I would say slow down, enjoy the process, and get advice. Get advice, man. Don't just assume you know it. Don't just watch a few videos on YouTube and jump in. I mean, if it's not going to cost you anything, fine, go for it. You know, swing the bat. But otherwise, talk to some experts, even if they're not experts. Find out what didn't work for them. And sometimes even that doesn't work. You know, you still got to maybe sometimes try it for yourself.
Experiment it. Yeah, I think it's do something. If you fail, like if you want to do something, do it.
Yeah.
If you fail, like cool. Now keep doing it, but don't keep failing and doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, that's the old.
It's a decision once you're doing that.
Well, it's the definition of insanity.
Yeah,
and we say that. I haven't done it a lot lately. It doesn't seem like, because most of our guys, even though we've got a couple new, fresh car salespeople, a lot of our people are seasoned. Is the best way to put it. But man, they used to say it at one of the dealerships I've worked for so many times. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome.
result.
Yeah, you can't keep doing that. You've got to keep tweaking. I'm not saying give up. I'm not saying don't fail. I'm just saying if you want to save yourself some brain damage, and especially the big thing is saving money. If you're out to start a business, if you're out to go into business without capital, without the way to do it, in a car business, obviously the dealership's going to give you all the money to do it. They're going to give you a way to succeed, minus the clothing, the car, the way to get there. But if you're doing this, I mean, obviously you guys have got a lot of time and money invested in this sucker.
Oh, yeah.
You sure as heck didn't want to do this without any kind of idea of where you're going or what you're going to do it with or who you're going to market it to or who you're going to pitch it to or a way to make money off of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I already know in a short period of time, you guys are obviously smart enough to know that you knew how this was going to benefit or help you. Yeah. Unless you're one of those haves that's independently wealthy enough that you can just throw money at stuff until it works, or if it ever does, it doesn't matter. That'd be cool. Yeah. But most of us have-nots out here don't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. So I think, you got to use your head and be smart. And again, I don't think that's necessarily just someone who grew up in business. That doesn't make me successful by any means. I mean, believe me, I've made a lot of stupid decisions, a lot of stupid choices, and I've paid dearly for it. I still make stupid decisions. I still get, a little whimsical and overcharge the credit card every now and then because I think I had to have that. That's not smart, man. But but anybody can do what they really want to do. If and nowadays with the multimedia, there's more avenues to dial that in, to figure that out. I think fairly quickly. Just depends on how unique you want to be, but
No, it's awesome. Well, Rick, we appreciate it.
yeah, sure.
Thank
Sorry
you.
if it was babbling all over the place.
That's
but
great. That's what we love.
appreciate you guys'
you brought,
tolerance.
we're sitting here like you brought the fire. You got us thinking about some stuff. Brought the heat. Now we really appreciate you for
Of
Some,
course.
some pretty
Thanks.
good advice and tips for people. Hopefully, they actually,
Thank you.
take you up on your word, listen
Appreciate
to
it.
it, and maybe follow it, see how it helps them out too.
Yeah, I appreciate it. If you guys need barbecue, Picking Out Barbecue. If you guys want to go to a good bar, my brother does prime rib on Thursday nights at the Club Tap, Ryan and Christine. And if you want a car, man, call me. I'll get you with one of our good salespeople, or call Jamie Perez, my son-in-law. We'll hook you up. But if you want to just chat, as long as I got time, we'll chat. So it's nice meeting you guys. Appreciate it.
Likewise. Appreciate
Yeah,
it. Thanks.
Underrated, we the underdogs, underestimated.